Hey fellow nerds, today we are going to learn orthogonality of signals and Fourier series. We will start with orthogonality of signals, then get introduced to Fourier series, after which we also have to learn Parseval's theorem. First of all, let us understand what orthogonality means in the case of vectors. We have two vectors here, vector A and vector B. The angle between them is theta. The condition for these two vectors to be orthogonal is that the angle between them should be equal to 90 degree. Let us assume that the two vectors A and B are orthogonal and the angle between them is 90 degree. Then if you calculate the dot product of them, that is A dot B, which is equal to AB cos theta, but theta is 90 degree, so AB cos 90 degree, which is equal to 0 since cos 90 is 0. So we can conclude that the condition for two vectors A and B to be orthogonal is that their dot product should be equal to 0. Let us now define orthogonality for signals. For that, let's take two signals x1 of t and x2 of t. x1 of t and x2 of t will be orthogonal if integral from minus infinity to infinity x1 of t multiplied by x2 of t dt is equal to 0. That is, the integral of their products should be equal to 0. In the case of vectors, we called this dot product. In the case of signals, we can call this inner product. So we can conclude that two signals are orthogonal if their inner product is equal to 0. Now let us learn some properties of orthogonal signals. The first property says that two sinusoidal functions of different frequencies and different phases are always orthogonal. Obviously, we have to prove it. Let's take the first function x1 of t to be sine of omega 1t plus phi 1, and the second function x2 of t, let it be sine of omega 2t plus phi 2. A simplification that we can make here is that these two signals are periodic. So to get the inner product, we don't have to really integrate from minus infinity to infinity. Integrating over one time period will be enough because it is going to be repeated all over. So to check the orthogonality, we have to integrate from 0 to t the product of x1 of t and x2 of t. Here this will be equal to integral from 0 to t. x1 of t is sine of omega 1t plus phi 1. x2 of t is sine of omega 2t plus phi 2. Now according to a trigonometric identity, sine A sine B is the same as half of cos A minus B minus cos A plus B. Let's use it here. We have a 1 by 2 which can come out of the integral. So 1 by 2 multiplied by integral from 0 to t. Cos of A minus B will be omega 1t plus phi 1 minus omega 2t minus phi 2 minus cos of A plus B omega 1t plus phi 1 plus omega 2t plus phi 2 dt. We can integrate them separately. If you look at the first term, this is actually just a cos function. And you're integrating a cos function from 0 to t, which will give you 0. Because for a cos function, there is equal positive and negative in one time period. So if you integrate, you're going to get 0. The second part is also just a cos function. Integrating it from 0 to t will give you 0. So the inner product is simply 0, which means the two functions are orthogonal. The next property says two sinusoidal functions of the same frequency and phase are not orthogonal. To prove that, let's take x1 of t to be some a sine omega t and x2 of t to be some b sine omega t. To check the orthogonality, definitely we have to calculate the inner product. Integral from 0 to t, x1 of t, x2 of t dt. Here it will be integral from 0 to t a sine omega t, b sine omega t dt. A and b are constants, it can come out. So AB integral from 0 to t sine square omega t dt. Here we are integrating sine square omega t over one time period. We know sine has equal positive and negative, but once you square it, it will look kind of like this. Both the positive cycle and the negative cycle after squaring becomes positive. So if you integrate, you are not getting 0. The inner product here is not equal to 0, and therefore these two signals are not orthogonal. According to the next property, sine and cosine functions are always orthogonal. Let's take the first case. If they have different frequencies and phases, then we can take the first function x1 of t to be sine of omega 1t plus phi 1, and the second one x2 of t can be cos of omega 2t plus phi 2. To check the orthogonality, we have to calculate inner product. Integral from 0 to t x1 of t x2 of t dt. Here it will become integral from 0 to t sine of omega 1t plus phi 1 cos of omega 2t plus phi 2 dt. Let us use a trigonometric identity. Sine A sine B is the same as half of sine A plus B plus sine A minus B. Using this in our integral, we can take half out. Integral from 0 to t. First term will be sine of A plus B. So sine of omega 1t plus phi 1 plus omega 2t plus phi 2 plus the second term is sine A minus B omega 1t plus phi 1 minus omega 2t minus phi 2 dt. Now here the first term is just a sine function. We are integrating it over one time period, so we will get 0. Second term is also a sine function. Integrating from 0 to t, we will get 0. So the inner product here is 0, and sine and cosine functions are therefore orthogonal. Let us take the next case. What if they have the same frequency and same phases? Let's take the first signal x1 of t to be sine of omega t plus phi, and the second signal x2 of t can be cos of omega t plus phi. To check the orthogonality, we have to calculate the inner product. Integral from 0 to t x1 of t x2 of t dt. So here it becomes integral from 0 to t sine of omega t plus phi cos of omega t plus phi dt. Now this is of the form sine theta cos theta. According to trigonometric identity, if you have sine theta cos theta, this is the same as half of sine 2 theta. Using that here, what we get is half of integral from 0 to t sine 2 times omega t plus phi dt. But this is again integrating a sine function over one time period which is equal to 0. So we can conclude that a sine function and a cosine function are always orthogonal. It doesn't depend on if their frequency and phases are same or different. The next property says a sinusoidal function and a DC value are orthogonal. Let's take our first function x1 of t to be a DC value. Let's say it is a. The second function x2 of t is sinusoidal. So sine of omega t plus phi. Now we can actually consider x1 of t equal to a as a periodic function whose period is from minus infinity to infinity. So to take the inner product, we will integrate from minus infinity to infinity. First function multiplied by second function. Here it is going to be integral from minus infinity to infinity. First function is a, Second function is sine of omega t plus phi dt. But then a is a constant. Take it out. A integral from minus infinity to infinity sine of omega t plus phi dt. You're integrating a sine function from minus infinity to infinity. It has equal positives and negatives. So this is going to be 0. Inner product is 0. So we can say the sinusoidal function and the DC value are orthogonal. For the next property, let us take x1 of t and x2 of t and let us assume that they are orthogonal signals. Also, they are energy signals. That is, they have finite energy and a zero power. It is already given that they are orthogonal. Therefore, we can write their inner product integral from minus infinity to infinity x1 of t, x2 of t dt has to be equal to 0. Let us now consider we have a function y of t which is the sum of x1 of t and x2 of t. If I square both sides, I will get y square of t is equal to x1 of t plus x2 of t whole square. So this will be x1 square of t plus 2x1 of t x2 of t plus x2 square of t. Now I am going to integrate both sides. On the left hand side, I will get integral from minus infinity to infinity y square of t dt. On the right hand side, first I will have integral from minus infinity to infinity x1 square of t dt. The second term will be integral from minus infinity to infinity x1 of t, x2 of t dt. There is a 2. I'll keep it outside the integral since it is a constant. The third term will be integral from minus infinity to infinity x2 square of t dt. Now, first of all, x1 of t and x2 of t are orthogonal. And what we have here is the inner product, integral from minus infinity to infinity x1 of t, x2 of t dt. Since they are orthogonal, this term has to be 0. On the left hand side, what I can see over here is integral from minus infinity to infinity y square of t dt. Isn't this how we define the energy of a real signal y of t? Yes, this is just the energy of y of t. Similarly, this is going to give us the energy of x1 of t. And this one will give us the energy of x2 of t. So what we get here is Ey is Ex1 plus Ex2. This means that if x1 of t and x2 of t are orthogonal energy signals, then the energy of their sum is the sum of their energies. How about powers? These are energy signals, so their powers are 0. So power of the sum is also going to be 0. Power of y is the same as power of x1 is the same as power of x2. They are all 0. To see the next property, let us take x1 of t and x2 of t. Let them be orthogonal, but in this case they are power signals. They have finite power and infinite energy. But in any case, since they are orthogonal, their inner product is going to be 0. Integral from minus infinity to infinity x1 of t, x2 of t dt should be equal to 0. Now let us take another function y of t. Y of t is supposed to be the sum of x1 of t and x2 of t. We'll do the same thing we did earlier. We will square on both sides. So y square of t becomes x1 of t plus x2 of t whole square, that is x1 square of t plus 2x1 of t x2 of t plus x2 square of t. Since these are power signals, we will not just integrate, we will also take time average. So integrating both sides and taking average, let's see what we get. On the left hand side, we will have a limit t tends to infinity 1 by t integral from minus t by 2 to t by 2 y square of t dt. On the other side, the first term will become limit t tends to infinity 1 by t integral from minus t by 2 to t by 2 x1 square of t dt, plus the second term will be limit t tends to infinity 1 by t integral from minus t by 2 to t by 2 2x1 of t x2 of t. Let's take 2 out, let it be here, x1 of t x2 of t dt, plus the third term becomes limit t tends to infinity 1 by t integral from minus t by 2 to t by 2 x2 square of t dt. Now let's analyze what all these are. Obviously, this one is the inner product of these functions, and since they are orthogonal, it is going to be 0. On the left hand side, what we have here is the definition for power of a signal called y of t. So this is py. Similarly, this one will give us px1, and this one gives us power of x2. As a conclusion, we can write power of the y of t is the sum of powers of x1 of t and x2 of t. That is, if x1 of t and x2 of t are orthogonal power signals, the power of their sum will be equal to the sum of their powers. What about energy? They are power signals, they have infinite energy already, so the sum will also have infinite energy. Let us now try to recall how we represent a vector in a 2D plane. Over here, I have taken an x-axis and a y-axis. I have a vector here, I am calling it r vector. I have also mapped their x and y components. The x component is rx I cap and y component is ry j cap. Here I can easily write r vector will be equal to rx I cap plus ry j cap. Here I cap and j cap are unit vectors along the x and y axis. Also, I and j are mutually orthogonal because the angle between them is 90 degree. We know that any vector in this 2D plane can be defined using I cap and j cap. For example, if I have a vector like this, I can say it is some number I cap plus some number j cap. It is pretty obvious, but the most important concept here is that it is impossible to find another vector in this 2D plane that is orthogonal to both I and j. That is, you cannot find any vector in this plane that will make 90 degree with both j cap and I cap. So that makes them a complete set. The set of I and j, we can call it a complete set because they are enough to define any vector in this 2D plane. But the real question is, are they the only pair that has this property? Definitely not. Because I can take two axes like this, call them P and Q. I will call the unit vectors along them maybe m cap and n cap. Now here if I take my vector r, I will be able to define r with respect to n cap and m cap. It will be some constant multiplied by m cap plus some constant multiplied by n cap. So we can conclude that it is possible to define another set of mutually orthogonal vectors with similar properties as I cap and j cap. Let us now do the same analysis in a 3D space. We will recall how to represent a vector in a 3D space. So in a 3D space, I will take three axes x, y and z. This is my vector r. It will have three components, one along the x-axis, one along y-axis and one along z-axis. X component is rx I cap, y component is ry j cap and z component is rz k cap. So I can easily write the vector r is rx I cap plus ry j cap plus rz k cap. Here I, j and k are the unit vectors along x, y and z axis. Also I, j, k are mutually orthogonal because they are all at 90 degrees with each other. If you take a dot product of any two of them, you will get 0. Just like I have defined my R vector using I cap, J cap and K cap, any vector in this 3D space can be defined using I cap, J cap and K cap. It is also impossible to find another vector in this 3D space that is orthogonal to all of them. You can't find another vector that is making 90° with I cap, J cap and K cap. That is impossible. So we can say this is a complete set. These three vectors are enough to define any vector in this 3D space. But the same question again arises. Are these three the only set that can do this? No. You can take another x-axis, another y-axis, another z-axis that are all mutually perpendicular, and you can do the entire thing again. And not just that, in mathematics we have other coordinate systems also, like spherical coordinate system, cylindrical coordinate systems. They all have similar properties. So we can conclude it is possible to define another set of mutually orthogonal vectors with similar properties. Let us now generalize this result. Let us take three vectors in a 3D space, x1, x2 and x3, and they are mutually orthogonal. We have another vector in the 3D space called f. We can represent f like this. F is equal to some constant multiplied by x1 vector plus some constant multiplied by x2 vector plus some constant multiplied by x3 vector. It is possible to define vector f like that. Let us now take a dot product. We are going to take the dot product of f1 and x1. f1 dot x1 will be equal to c1 multiplied by x1 dot x1 plus c2 multiplied by x2 dot x1 plus c3 multiplied by x3 dot x1. But all these three are mutually orthogonal, which means the angle between them is 90°. So if you take x2 dot x1, you will get 0. If you take x3 dot x1, you will get 0. Over here, you're taking x1 dot x1. Angle between x1 and itself is just 0. So the dot product will be magnitude of x1 into magnitude of x1 into cos of 0, which is 1. So you simply get x1 square. The dot product will simply become c1 multiplied by magnitude of x1 square plus 0 plus 0. So I can write the first coefficient c1 is f1 dot x1 divided by square of magnitude of x1. Similarly, c2 will be f1 dot x2 divided by square of magnitude of x2. So in a generalized version, I can write like this. The coefficient of the ith term will be f dot xi divided by square of magnitude of xi vector. In this particular case, I can take values 1, 2 and 3. If you give I equal to 1, you will get C1. If you give I equal to 2, you will get C2. If you give I equal to 3, you will get C3. Again, here also we can say that since this is a 3D space, it is impossible to find another vector that is orthogonal to all three of them. And that means the set of x1, x2 and x3 make a complete set. They are enough to define any vector in this 3D space. Let us now apply this concept into signals. Let us start by assuming there are n signals x1, x2 up to xn that make a complete orthogonal set, which means they are all orthogonal to each other and also they are all enough to define any signal in their space. Now, since they are all orthogonal to each other, their inner product is going to be 0. So I can write integral from minus infinity to infinity. Let's take the mth signal x m of t, multiply it with some nth signal x n of t dt. This should be equal to 0, but there is a condition. M should be not equal to n. This is the same in the case of vectors also, right? I dot j is 0. j dot k is also 0. K dot I will also be equal to 0, but if you take I dot I, this is not 0. AB cos theta will be magnitude of I cap into magnitude of I cap into cos of angle between them is 0 degree, so you actually get 1. In a more generalized situation, you will get the square of the magnitude of that vector. So here also, inner product equal to 0 is only applicable when you're taking two different signals that are orthogonal to each other. So let us take a note on what happens if m is equal to n, which means you're taking the same signal. If m is equal to n, the inner product becomes integral from minus infinity to infinity x n of t multiplied by x n of t dt. And this is simply integral from minus infinity to infinity xn of t square dt. But what is this? This is what we defined as the energy of the signal xn of t. So this is equal to En. Let us write our observations together. Integral from minus infinity to infinity x m of t x n of t dt. That is the inner product of any two signals in this complete orthogonal set will be equal to 0 if m is not equal to n. That is, you are taking two different signals. It will be equal to energy of that particular signal if you're taking the same signal, that is m is equal to n. Let us now try to represent a signal using this set of orthogonal signals. For that, let us consider a signal called f of t, and it ranges from t1 to t2. Now, we can write f of t by using a set of n mutually orthogonal signals x1 of t, x2 of t up to xn of t. I did not write equating, I wrote approximating. That is because unlike vectors, when we write a signal in terms of orthogonal signals in a set, there is supposed to be some error in it. So it won't be exactly equal. There will be a small error. So we're using the word approximating. So we can write the signal f of t as some constant multiplied by the first signal x1 of t plus some other constant multiplied by the second signal x2 of t plus etc. up to cn xn of t. We can write this as a summation from n equal to 1 to capital N cn xn of t. I made some space here to write one of the most important results. I'm going to write it down first and then explain it. So, if f of t is summation from n equal to 1 to capital N cn xn of t, then coefficient of the nth signal from the orthogonal set will be integral from t1 to t2 f of t xn of t dt divided by integral from t1 to t2 xn square of t dt. I will only put it in a box once you understand what it is. So let's have a comparison with vectors. Bring back the vector f that we were talking about earlier. F was equal to c1 x1 vector plus c2 x2 vector plus c3 x3 vector. And then what we did is we found the dot product of f and x1. The first term becomes c1 multiplied by x1 dot x1, and the next term will have x2 dot x1, which is 0. The next term will have x3 dot x1, which is 0, because obviously x1, x2, x3 are all mutually orthogonal. From this, we made the result that c1 will be f dot x1 divided by square of magnitude of x1. Why? Because x1 dot x1 will give us square of magnitude of x1. Let's compare this result with this one. To get the coefficient of x1, we had to take dot product of our vector and x1. But we know dot product in vectors is analogous to inner product in signals. So over here, I have taken inner product of f of t and the signal whose coefficient I have to find out. And in the denominator, I have square of magnitude of x1. But where did it come from? From the dot product of x1 with itself. So here in the denominator, I will take dot product of xn of t with xn of t, which will give me this integral from t1 to t2 xn square of t dt. So coefficient for the nth signal in the orthogonal set will be inner product of our signal with that signal divided by inner product of the signal with itself. Now that you understand how we got the expression for the nth coefficient, let's put it in a box. So we got the coefficient of the nth signal in the orthogonal set to define our signal f of t is integral from t1 to t2 f of t xn of t dt, which is the inner product of our signal and that component signal, divided by inner product of the component signal with itself. What is integral from t1 to t2 xn square of t dt? This is nothing but the energy of that nth signal. To get the energy, we actually have to integrate from minus infinity to infinity. But like I said, we have already defined the signal to range from t1 to t2 only. So to get the energy, you only have to integrate from t1 to t2. Using this, we can write a better expression for Cn. Cn is 1 by En integral from t1 to t2 f of t x n of t dt. That is inner product of our signal and the component signal divided by energy of the particular component signal. Here n can take values from 1, 2 up to n because we have n component signals in the orthogonal set. We can define the orthogonal set like this: set of xn of t, where n can take all the values from 1 to n. We can call this set a set of basis functions or a set of basis signals. The conclusion that we can make from all of these is simply this. Using a complete orthogonal set of n different signals, we can define our signal f of t as summation from n equals 1 to n Cn xn of t, where t can take values from t1 to t2 according to our definition, where Cn will be given as 1 by energy of the nth signal multiplied by the inner product of our signal with that component signal. So integral from t1 to t2 f of t x n of t dt. Here n can take values from 1, 2 up to capital N. We did this using a set of n orthogonal signals in it. How about we take a set of signals with infinite signals that are mutually orthogonal? The advantage here is that as we increase the number of signals, the error that I was talking about earlier will become smaller and smaller. So if you take infinite signals that are orthogonal to each other, then the error will almost become zero and you don't have to use the word approximately anymore. You can say f of t is this much. That is, if we take infinite signals that are mutually orthogonal, then f of t will be summation from n equal to 1 to infinity Cn xn of t. Again, we are defining f of t between a time interval from t1 to t2. So we can write t1 less than or equal to t less than or equal to t2. Here, the nth coefficient Cn will be 1 divided by energy of that component signal multiplied by the inner product of our signal and that component signal. So integral from t1 to t2 f of t x n of t dt. And here n can take values from 1, 2 up to infinity because we have infinite mutually orthogonal signals in the set. Now, representing a signal like this is called the Fourier series representation of f of t with respect to the set of all xn of t. Set of xn of t in this case is a set of infinite signals that are all mutually orthogonal and is a complete set. Now, by property 5 that we learned in this video, energy of a signal f will be the sum of energies of the component orthogonal signals. Here we defined f of t like this: c1 multiplied by the first component x1 of t plus c2 x2 of t plus, we will have infinite terms like this. So energy of f of t will be the sums of energies of all of these. Energy of f of t is integral from t1 to t2 f square of t dt. According to the property, this will be equal to integral from t1 to t2 c1 x1 of t square dt, which is the energy of c1 x1 of t, plus integral from t1 to t2 c2 x2 of t square dt, and it goes on like that. We'll have infinite terms. But here we'll have a c1 square which is a constant, so we can take that out of the integral. Here we'll have a c2 square which is again a constant. We can take that out of the integral. So this becomes c1 square integral from t1 to t2 x1 square of t dt plus c2 square integral from t1 to t2 x2 square of t dt, and we'll get infinite terms like this. Now obviously this one is the energy of f of t. I'll call it EF. This much is the energy of x1 of t. I'll call it E1. And this much is the energy of the second one, E2. So we get energy of f of t is c1 square multiplied by energy of x1 of t plus c2 square multiplied by energy of x2 of t plus etc. You will have infinite terms. We can now write it as a summation. Energy of f of t is summation from n equals 1 to infinity cn square En. This equation goes by the name Parseval's theorem. Now, one thing I'd like to bring your attention into is that in the first video where we were learning energy of signals, energy of a signal x of t was defined like this: integral from minus infinity to infinity magnitude of x of t squared dt. But over here, I called this the energy of f of t, but I haven't taken magnitude. Integral is from t1 to t2, but that is because f of t is only defined between t1 to t2. But why have I not taken magnitude? The reason is, till now we have only been dealing with real signals. They are not complex valued, so you can simply square them. You don't have to take magnitude first. But now we have to generalize all the results that we learned to complex signals also. For that, consider a set of complex functions x1 of t, x2 of t up to infinite signals over a time interval t1 to t2. Let us write the condition for them to be orthogonal with each other. For real valued functions, we defined that inner product of two signals have to be 0, then they are orthogonal. Here also it is the same, but the way we define inner product is a bit different. We can write integral from t1 to t2 x m of t multiplied by conjugate of xn of t. Instead of taking xn of t as it is, in case it was real, we'll take the conjugate of the second one. dt is equal to 0. Then we can say they are orthogonal. Now this always happens if you're taking m is not equal to n. If m is equal to n, then the inner product becomes integral from t1 to t2 xn of t multiplied by conjugate of xn of t itself dt. But the product of a complex valued signal and its conjugate, what is it? If we have a plus jb, conjugate is a minus jb, if you take the product, you will get x square plus b square. But what is the magnitude of a plus jb? Root of a square plus b square. So their product is the square of their magnitude. So product of xn of t and x conjugate n of t will be the square of the magnitude of xn of t. Integral from t1 to t2 magnitude of xn of t squared dt, and this is what we call energy of the nth signal xn of t. Here we finally have to use the magnitude because this is a complex valued signal. Putting them together, we can write integral from t1 to t2 x m of t multiplied by conjugate of x n of t will be equal to 0 if m is not equal to n, and it will be equal to energy of that signal if m is equal to n. Let us now generalize the Fourier series representation of a function f of t using the set of infinite signals that are orthogonal to each other. We can still write f of t is equal to c1 x1 of t plus c2 x2 of t plus etc. We'll have infinite terms since we have infinite component signals. The difference comes in defining the coefficient. Cn will be 1 by energy of the nth signal integral from t1 to t2. Earlier we used to write inner product of f of t and the component signal. But for complex valued signals, the inner product is defined differently. So we'll get f of t conjugate of xn of t dt. That is the only difference. So we can conclude it like this. F of t can be written as summation from n equal to 1 to infinity Cn xn of t, where t can take values from t1 to t2 because that's how we define the functions. And here nth coefficient Cn will be 1 by energy of the nth component signal multiplied by integral from t1 to t2 f of t multiplied by conjugate of xn of t dt. And n can take values 1, 2 up to infinity. This is again the Fourier representation of f of t with respect to the set of all xn of t's. Let us end these videos by comparing vectors and signals. We know a vector can be represented as a sum of its components. Similarly, a signal can be represented as a sum of its components. In vectors, we have vector coordinate systems that are formed by mutually orthogonal vectors. Similarly, in signals, we can form signal coordinate systems by sets of mutually orthogonal signals. Examples for coordinate systems in vectors are rectangular coordinate systems, cylindrical coordinate systems, and spherical coordinate systems. In signals also we have various coordinate systems, but the ones that we will be dealing with in this course are trigonometric functions, that is sinusoid functions, and exponential functions. So that's all about it for today. See you in the next video. And don't forget to subscribe.